late.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll call to order the March meeting of the Long-Term Planning Committee of the Police Oversight Commission. First, we begin with public comments. We have 7 people who signed up for public comments. Arthur Grothus, he was the first person.
Do you want to approve the minutes, agenda?
We have to. Could you please state your name and address?
My name is Barbara Grothus. I live at 905 Silver Avenue Southwest, downtown.
Welcome, Ms. Grothus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here today, like many of our citizens, horrified at the recent events in our city. I believe that our current chief is a political appointee who has no experience dealing with the egregious. He has no police experience, no supervisory experience, and he is dealing with a department that is in crisis and out of control. We need to demand that he is gone and we get somebody competent to reform and deal with problems that we have here in Albuquerque. People are not feeling safe to move here, to visit here, much less to live here. Imagine living with a family member who has significant mental health issues. Due to cutbacks in mental health services in our state, we have lost any hope of having care outside of our jail system, and our police are clearly preferring to shoot people than take them somehow safely to jail. We treat bears in our community who have claws. They're completely unpredictable, wild animals. We tranquilize them and move them someplace else. And our methodology here is to shoot people, put them in handcuffs, and drag them off, sometimes to the hospital and sometimes not. We really need some change to our system here. Citizens are not going to tolerate this anymore, and we're sick and outraged at this kind of ongoing problems that we have with our police. Thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you very much. Yes, the chair, Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you. I hadn't expected to make comments, so they're not prepared, but I see that we have a list of speakers. It occurs to me to describe that our commission and the long-term planning committee, of which we're sitting meeting of now, have a history having to do with police shootings. A year and more ago, police shootings were taken up by a small committee in this room and in other venues. And because we thought that this was not an appropriate place to undertake full study of police shootings, we moved them from a small committee hearing to the full commission and full commission hearings. So I did not come prepared to discuss and ask pertinent questions and so forth about that shooting, and I think that a full commission hearing is the appropriate venue, and a committee hearing here is about the topics that are on our agenda and about a more limited or proscribed set of issues. I take your point. I would never stifle the comment, but I would defer our consideration of these important matters until the full commission meets. I want you to understand that as best you can.
Thank you, Commissioner Siegel. I might add that the Long-Term Planning Committee has no, as Commissioner Siegel pointed out, has no role in police and often involved shootings. Only the POC as in a full body does. But from the point of view of the full POC, in response to Mrs. Groth's remarks, under the current ordinance, we have the full POC has no authority to remove the chief of police or anybody else. Number one. Number two, in terms of our role in officer-involved shootings, under the current ordinance, both the POCs authority and the IRO, the Independent Review Officer's authority, is limited to monitoring the investigations of police shootings that are conducted by the Internal Affairs Department, a division of the police department. There have been some people who call for change in that. I personally have proposed some recommendations to the City Council that have been circulated to the City Council that would change the authority of the POC and the IRO so that the POC, if the City Council decides to amend the ordinance, would have independent authority to investigate officer-involved shootings. But until and unless the City Council acts on that, the role of the POC is very limited and the role of the IRO is very limited. Okay, the second person is Desi Brown.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Desi Brown. I'm a part-time instructor at the University of New Mexico, as well as a program manager and grad student with the Peace Studies program. And I've done extensive research on issues of police brutality and police training. I think hopefully you guys at some point have read a paper that I wrote a couple years ago related to that, and I don't even know where to start. There's so much to talk about that's, in relation to what's happened in the last week or so. First, totally facetiously, I'd like to, thank this board, the POC, the mayor, the chief of police, Rob Berry, and everybody else for not taking any action on this stuff over the course of the last 2 decades. I'd like to thank you because you've given me plenty of job security. I can graduate and I can finish a 20-year career of teaching at UNM and focus on issues like this and teaching my students how not to do things. And I'll never run out of anything to say. Right now I'm actually missing a class that I'm supposed to be teaching because my program manager is teaching it for me, and he's going over all the issues that have gone on this week so that I can address it later on this afternoon after I leave this meeting. Tuesday night, and I'm just giving you some examples, Tuesday night I started teaching a class, brand new 8-week class, 25 students who'd never taken a Peace Studies class before. Started at 6 o'clock, the same time that the march happened downtown. And 10 minutes into a class, we were showing live video of what's going on. And I've got 25 students who are absolutely enraged at what has not happened in this city. Sure, they're mad about what happened in relation to the shooting, but they're enraged that nobody has actually taken action. It's pathetic that nobody has taken action on this. Yes, this might not be the role of your board, but maybe you should work on trying to make that the role of your board. The scariest thing that we've heard in the last 2 weeks, I think, is the statement by our 3-week-old, 4-week-old new police chief when he was talking about the shooting as being justified, lawfully justified. That tells me that the police academy is currently training police officers to take action up to what has been proven to be okay given case law. That's really problematic. Shouldn't police officers be trained to do what is morally and ethically correct as opposed to being trained to do what meets case law? That's a really, really frightening thing to me. I think the time is done for talking. I think the citizens of the city have said that, and the time is done. It is now to take action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown. As I indicated, this committee and the POC can only function in accordance with the ordinance. It only has the authority that the City Council has granted to us. And if the decision to change that is with the City Council, so perhaps your remarks are best addressed to the City Council for change, not to us. Commissioner Barker.
My comments are to echo yours, Mr. Chair. This board, I think, to a man is in consonance with your thought processes. Again, I think that we have made our proposals as to how to amend our regulations, and your best venue to express your thoughts is to the City Council.
And I thank you, Commissioner Barker. And I should emphasize, by the way, that the proposals that I made, that I mentioned, are only my personal proposals. They're not the proposals of the Commission or any other commissioner. Dr. Roberto Sosa.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Dr. Luis Roberto Sosa.
I apologize.
I have a PhD in sociology and social welfare. I also taught part-time in criminology department at UNM. I'd like to give you a little bit of personal experience. When I was a young person here in Albuquerque, my community, I'm of Mexican descent, were totally afraid of police officers for the violence, for the inhumane treatment that they gave my community and to us young people. I know it's not your purview to really discuss this further, and that you have to understand where we're coming from as citizens of this community. I have some family members that are police officers right now. They were in the military, and the training they got there was very trained to kill. That's what the military does. So now they're police officers, and they have the same mentality, and each of Mexican descent. So my position is that the police department, the philosophy, the administration of information, law, what have you, is always to be anti-human, to be very, what I say now is that these family members are now on the criminal side of the Justice Department. They're the ones that, most of the conditions of the police department ought to be involved with how to deal with domestic violence, domestic dispute, family condition situations. That's the majority of the work that they do. And you don't have to have the training of shoot and kill. What you have to have is know how to communicate, how to understand family conditions, community conditions. And I'm really afraid that the police department has no inclination to offer that type of training to its officers. And also, so I blame the mayor and certainly the city council if they approve that, and certainly the police chief. They're the ones that structure the administration, structure, the institution, and they're responsible for the type of training their police officers get. Thank you very much, and whether you receive us or not, community is angry, and we as citizens demand that any place that we speak on these issues ought to be respected and understood. Thank you.
Dr. Sosa, let me make clear that because I've indicated what our limitations are, doesn't mean people are not welcome to come and share their views during public comment period, and that we're open to those views, obviously.
We too are citizens of
And
the community.
Commissioner Siegel, do you want to?
That's part
I'm
of
just, Commissioner Barker, rather.
He's the one with the hair.
Yeah, right.
No, we too are citizens of the community, and so when you don't, I'd appreciate it if we don't refer to we, they, you, us, in your speech. Not that I'm saying it's not that we're in disagreement with you.
Mr. Charles Harrison.
Afternoon, Commissioners. First, I want to commend you guys on scrutinizing the IRO's investigation at the full POC, and I hope that the Ltpc chair reports next month that I have once again asked for a special meeting to bring the IRO before the full POC to explain her dereliction of her contracted duties before the POC places her on notice of termination, as is allowed under the existing ordinance. That is the POC's controlling legal authority. I am a member of the newly formed City of Albuquerque Task Force on Public Safety, and I invite everyone to come to City Council on April 7th at 5 p.m. I hope you all know where it is, and where our 14 demands that we presented to the Department of Justice yesterday will be presented to the City Council, and including the full taking over of APD by the Department of Justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Lee S.
name's Lisa Lurie. I'm a musician and recording engineer here in Albuquerque. And I'm just here because I'm scared of the police at this point. I go home at night, I have a night job. I'm scared of getting pulled over by the police. I don't want to be around them anymore. I don't care if they're here. I think there's a fundamental flaw in the way they're being trained. It's obviously leaking over now. They're being trained to be fearful of people instead of accepting, and nurturing, and protecting. And a lot of people are angry about it. How do you deal with something like that when the entire police force has been trained this way? How are we supposed to? Can you stop a police force from thinking the way they've already been brainwashed into thinking? Can that even happen? I mean, there needs to be a review by a third-party entity that is not government-controlled into the situation, full-on into how people are being trained for APD. Why are the cops so cowardly in shooting people? It didn't seem to me like the man in the mountains had to die. He could have been shot somewhere that was non-lethal. He could have been shot with the beanbag rounds. You know, it's a total lack of training, in my opinion. And fundamentally, things need to be changed at that level, or else things will continue on the path that they're on. Thanks.
Ashley Steele Chavez, please.
Hi, my name is Ashley. I live at 1218 Palm Springs, and I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. My family's from here. My grandparents were born here. My great-grandparents, etc., etc. You all know the story. I am tired of the culture of violence that is so ingrained in our city. I am tired of the continued acts of violence against women and children, and I am tired of the failure of APD to protect us. I am also tired of APD violence directed at its citizens. There is no reason that the APD should have killed more people since the year 2010 than the NYPD. We are a small city with a higher level of police violence than the largest city in the United States. This is ridiculous. Many members of APD have been charged with domestic violence against their partners. We all remember Levi Chavez and the botched investigation of the murder of his wife. We know that this is a problem that permeates our culture, and yet this specific issue of violent officers who are improperly trained to respond first with violence and then ask questions continues to go unaddressed. We have police officers who do not understand the law that they are supposed to uphold. We have no effective means as a people with which to address our concerns. This is the Oversight Committee. I assume that you are charged with holding the police accountable, and yet you tell us to go elsewhere. We are mere citizens. What are we supposed to do besides voice our opinions? But the mayor and the police chief don't listen to us, so we are here to voice our fears to you. Why not require police? There are several things that they could do, simple things that they have implemented in other police departments that have lowered the levels of violence. Requiring police officers to wear cameras, retraining, focusing the training instead on integrating questions rather than reactionary training. These are all effective means of changing a department from within. And yet, Mayor Barry and the Chief of Police, Eden, have not addressed any of these issues. And I wonder why. Is it because that they don't see what's going on? They aren't aware as we are because they're not living in the violence the same way that we are? And I would just like someone to listen, someone to hear our complaints. Thank you.
Amanda Gallegos.
Hello. My name is Amanda Gallegos. I live at 725 Cardenas, Northeast Albuquerque, 87108. Let's see. The reason I'm here obviously is because I'm a concerned citizen like everybody else, and just in general not feeling safe with the police.
Would you
Yes.
speak closer to the microphone?
Yeah.
please?
What I was saying is that I don't feel safe with the police, and I think that that's why everybody's here. And so I appreciate you guys taking your time to listen to our comments and our concerns. I think one thing that I've heard a few times is the culture in the police department that we're afraid of. And I ask that you guys consider testing everyone's testosterone levels and also psychological evaluations. And I'd also ask that you guys implement and demand a de-escalation training techniques for everybody in the police department. I'm also concerned that the other 4 cops are not being held accountable at this point, from what I understand. In terms of aiding relief as the oversight committee, I ask that you consider the needs of our homeless people. And one request that they have is that there be a blanket storage provided somewhere for them, or at least that the police don't take their blankets. Thank you.
Joe Gallegos. I might say, while Mr. Gallegos is coming to the podium, that simply because we are silent doesn't mean we're either agreeing or disagreeing with anyone. It's just to give everyone an opportunity to make a statement. Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you. My name is Joel Gallegos. I'm a representative of the Answer Coalition. If I sound a bit hoarse, it's because I was leading some chants at the Tuesday protest. And I wish you all had some more teeth, as they say, so that you could bite these criminals in the ass. I'm really upset about what's happening. I've been working on this issue since 2010, and I know that this issue goes way back. And I think that there's some fundamental changes that need to happen within the department. But at the same time, I want to make sure that, my brothers and sisters who are part of this struggle against police brutality understand that even if we had, pistols that shoot flower petals at criminals that would render them incapacitated, it wouldn't make much of a difference, because you're still criminalizing an element of society that people seem to see as being unwanted. When you have homeless people who are being thrown in jail for the simple fact that they're loitering, or the simple fact that they're panhandling or jaywalking, then it doesn't matter how violent or non-violent the police are. If these people are still being thrown in jail and taking their freedoms away, it doesn't really matter how violent or non-violent those police officers are. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed, because we don't want a kinder, gentler police department. I mean, any police officer will tell you that they're simply enforcing the law. They're not necessarily for or against any of these laws per se, but they're simply enforcing them. And we got to realize that the laws that are in place represent the people who are able to throw the most money at them. And I think that we're all adults here, and I think that we know that we're not naive about that. And it's something that's, under the surface, but nobody really seems to be talking about it. Nobody seems to be talking about the fact that you have private companies who contract all these think tanks to create all these different laws that criminalize poor people, and then you look at the role of the police and what they do. I mean, who evicts people out of their homes when they've been foreclosed on by a greedy bank who's been laundering millions of dollars from drug cartels, which is actually the case. It's not even a conspiracy theory. This is actually, proven fact, a matter of public record. And it seems that, we get caught up in sensationalism, but I think now the police officer in the system has awoken a sleeping dragon, and that paper tiger that is the state will soon burn away pretty quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Josh Lawrence.
Hello, my name is Joshua James Ryan Lawrence, and I'm actually a Texas native, where many folks around the country used to believe that Texas had some of the worst police force in the country. Today, you can see on TV that that's just not the case. I just want to bring up some talking points, some research points, both for you and for everybody else that might see this. One being posse comitatus. If you don't know what it is, please research it. Google is a handy tool. 2, what is the difference between law enforcement and civil servants or peace officers? Law enforcement has become a corporation that now creates profit for the municipalities, which has also become a corporation. We assign fees and laws to create more profit. 2, 3, There's a big problem in our police force and police forces around the country as far as performance-enhancing drugs. Professional baseball, football, basketball, any kind of sport, the Olympics. Our athletes are tested, and if they get caught using any of these performance-enhancing drugs, they're eliminated from the sport because it will make a police officer trigger happy, and it happens way too often. Definitely had more points, but I will leave it at that. It's definitely a good start, so please do your research.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Marlena Hardy, I believe it is.
My name is Tylena Hardy. I live in Nob Hill at 601 Solana Drive Northeast. I came here to voice with my fellow people who are concerned. Sounds stupid, sorry, okay. Anyways, I came here to tell you that I'm really disappointed in you. As a police oversight commission, we should have seen something done by now. I think, to my knowledge, you've been a board or a commission for quite some time. I also think that there's something very wrong with the way that our officers are being trained. In my own experience with officers, I've had both negative and positive. I've had officers come to save me in domestic violence situations, and I'm very grateful for that. But still, when I was asking them to treat my partner with compassion and empathy, they were not. Sometimes that's what it takes. But I think that also in my experiences with police, not involving domestic violence, they tend to be very aggressive. And I think as protectors of the people, that's not what needs to be done, because that type of behavior is usually referred to as being abusive. So I think that something really needs to change, because obviously the people are concerned and afraid. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you very much. That concludes our public comments. Oh, there is one more.
Soraya, namaste. Yes.
Namaste.
Yes. Hi, my name is Saida Namaste. I live in the Southeast Heights. Last night I had a neighbor call the police because there was a person needing medical help that had collapsed in my front yard. And as neighbors, we were concerned that if we called 911, we didn't know if the man would be killed. That's actually a fear that we had as neighbors if we called for medical help for him. And that's why I'm here today. And I'm here also to ask the Police Oversight Commission, what is your response to the thousands of people in the street on Tuesday night? What is your response to the international media and national media attention to the problem of our police department? What is your response to the killings of Alfred on Tuesday night? What is your response to the killing of James Boyd last week? What is the response of the Police Oversight Commission? What are you going to do as far as City Council? We will be there on April 7th. We will take all 300 seats at the City Council meeting. But what is this Police Oversight Commission going to do? I think a lot of us are here because we want to know that. Obviously, you can see that we are afraid of our police. We do not feel they protect us. Maybe you feel that way too. But there's a real problem, and we need to hear from you that you see the problem of our police department, that they are out of control, they don't have proper training, they are violent, they are killing unarmed civilians, and we are worried that we could be next, or our family, or my child in my home last night when the police came to give medical help, and we didn't know if the guy would get shot. And I went out there to film it, hoping that that would maybe pressure the police not to pull their guns on the guy. So that's why I came today, is to find out where do you stand on this. I have not seen a public comment in the papers from you and all the national media attention. Are you going to make a comment? Are you going to make a public statement? Are you going to ask for recommendations? Are you going to ask for changes? I think we all would like to know that.
Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you. I would like to respond to Ms. Namaste as well as specifically to Ms. Hardy and Mr. Brown and perhaps to others. There are things we can do and things we can't. Under our bylaws, amongst other things, if 1,000 citizens sign a petition, we must hold a special meeting. That's on you to do, but if you did it, we would be forced to meet on the topic that you state. Short of that, also within the scope of our rules, we may call for a special meeting, either by having the chair call for it or 3 commissioners call for it. And likewise, we may call for an emergency meeting, both of which are within our purview. I would say that I have asked the chair for such a special meeting, and to this time it has not been granted, but I would call on my fellow commissioners to speak up if they see fit to also call for that, and then we could have a special hearing of the full POC to take up these matters that have been brought before you. At this time, a single commissioner can't do that. I'm going to add something else that may be uncomfortable to several of you. I would ask you to think and hold in your hearts the many outstanding police officers who are afraid as well of putting on their uniforms and are deeply concerned about their job as they go to work every day, and they are trying their very utmost to do a good job and to keep this city as safe as they can under what they realize is a very difficult cloud of suspicion in a difficult time. And reach out to them when you can. They're people too. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the review and approval of minutes, which we didn't get, I didn't get any copies of minutes. Huh? That's not on the agenda.
Oh, okay. I know it's not on the agenda.
Do you want to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion that due to the length and value of this public comment, I move that we pass on the minutes.
Okay. You're moving to pass on the minutes? All right. I'll need a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. That's we'll pass on the minutes. The next item on the agenda is the APD training and practice regarding the search of homes and businesses to assure officer safety. And let me reiterate for the public that under the Open Meetings Act, we are barred from taking up any matter, any particular shootings or anything else that are not on the agenda. It would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So therefore, we're going to pursue this agenda. Again, the Sergeant, we had postponed this matter from the last meeting so that you and your colleagues could have time to prepare for it.
And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get anybody to appear here today. They have a training class going on. They're doing our annual training as well at the academy, so I had nobody to come and speak to you as far as the actual training that's being implemented. I can discuss, kind of our practices, what, I've been trained and what I've done in my career as far as doing a cursory search for officer safety.
But the last time we left it, I thought we were going to have someone from the training department come and talk to us.
I'm not able to provide that today.
Why don't we then pass this matter until the next month when we can get someone here.
Okay.
The next item of the agenda is review and analysis and recommendation regarding the following SOP, that is relating to an officer being permitted to make false statements as part of a lawful criminal investigation.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I did speak with Deputy Chief Page on this. His contention is that we're not going to change or do a policy to relate to this. He feels that if there's any officer that does not, or that uses this technique inappropriately, that there's SOP to address that in our conduct. So
Say that again, this one?
there's SOP to address that if it's used inappropriately already.
Well, that's one of the things we were asking. Is there an SOP that deals with this?
So yeah, if it's used inappropriately, yes, there's conduct for officers in code of conduct.
What SOP are we talking about?
It would be code of conduct. So it'd be 1-04. And it would be meaning it's going to, basically it's the code of conduct 104-4, I want to say it's A, and it would be that the officer would need to implement policy in an intelligently manner.
So there's no specific SOP?
It's not a specific SOP, but it would be able to apply to this.
And the point of our having this on the agenda is so we can look into the issue. Are you saying the deputy chief has already taken a position he doesn't want to even look into the issue?
Yes, he's felt that this is something that's been practiced, it's acceptable, and they're not going to change anything at this point.
And you're not going to consider preparing an SOP to deal directly with it?
No.
Well, this is one of the unfortunate examples of the limited authority that the Police Oversight Commission in general and the Long-Term Planning Committee specifically has. Because we have no authority to direct the police department to do anything.
So what is your function then?
Is that a fair statement to Ms. Hammer?
That's what the chief is telling you.
Let's give you some teeth.
Yeah. What's your function?
Can you
explain to us, please? We don't know.
Maintain order, please, in the room. If you have the floor, you're welcome to speak.
Chair Stein, I'm not here to give legal advice to the commission, to the committee. You're familiar with what the ordinance states and what the powers are. So you can, there are provisions within the ordinance, I believe, that talk about making written requests to the chief for change, and that's permitted.
All right, well, we'll take this matter under advisement and decide how we're going to proceed with this matter in the future. The next item on the agenda is study of trends and analysis of all civil litigation against APD officers in the last 5 years. And as for this, I want to read to my colleagues and the public an exchange of emails that I had with with the City Attorney's Office. On March 14th, I addressed an email to Mr. Turk in which I said, I'm writing to you in my capacity as Chairman of the Long-Term Planning Committee, the Ltpc of the Police Oversight Commission. As you know, the Chairman of the POC directed the Long-Term Planning Committee to look into the conduct of a, quote, study of trends and analysis of all civil litigation against APD officers in the last 5 years, end quote. At the February meeting of the Long-Term Planning Committee, the independent review officer, Ms. Hammer, indicated to the committee that you communicated to her that you were unwilling to send a knowledgeable representative who was involved in APD civil litigation to the committee hearing in order to discuss the matter, that you did not have the staff to conduct such a study, and that any material that could be made available to the Ltpc was already public record and would be subject to an IPRA request. The purpose of this email is to respectfully request that you reconsider your decision and send such a knowledgeable representative to the March Ltpc meeting to discuss several issues related to such a study, or if you would prefer, to meet privately with me prior to the March meeting to discuss those issues. As you know, the POC ordinance provides, among other things, that the POC, quote, shall audit and monitor all investigations and or police shootings under investigation by APD's internal affairs, end quote. The ordinance also provides that the POC should, quote, engage in a long-term planning process through which it identifies major problems and establishes a program of policy suggestions and studies each year, end quote. Moreover, the ordinance requires the POC to make quarterly reports to the mayor, the city council, and to the public regarding, inter alia, among other things, quote, the status of long-term planning process, identifying major problems, policy suggestions, and studies as required by this ordinance. The purpose of a study of trends and analysis of all civil litigation against APD officers in the last 5 years, or some mutually acceptable variation of such a study, is severalfold. First, such a study is needed to respond to the public perception that there is a major disconnect between the review of officer-involved shootings by the POC and the results of civil litigation in connection with those same shootings. The POC finds that all of the shootings are justified, even though the city is paying out large amounts of taxpayers' money and damages for many of those same shootings. Such a study should be helpful in publicly establishing whether or not such a public perception of a disconnect is justified, and also clarifying for the public the differences between the two processes. Just as importantly, such a study would assist both the Ltpc and the POC in identifying those mechanisms, both formal and informal, by which any systematic problems that are identified through APD civil litigation can and should be resolved during revisions or additions to the APD's standard operating procedures, or through modifications to APD training or to hiring practices. The POC would then be in a position, depending on the outcome of the study, to make recommendations, if appropriate, to the APD on how to systematically improve upon the establishment or the implementation of such mechanisms. Finally, such a study would assist the Ltpc and the POC to independently identify any issues that have arisen in connection with APD civil litigation that warrant further examination by the Ltpc and the POC for the purpose, if appropriate, of making policy suggestions to the APD as required by the ordinance, whether related to SOPs, training, hiring, or any other operations of the APD. I fully appreciate that neither the city attorney's office nor the risk management division is required to cooperate with the POC for this study, and that the POC can only make recommendations to the APD. However, I would hope that you, and with your support, the risk management division would be willing to voluntarily cooperate with the Ltpc and the POC in order that the POC can function in accordance with the requirements and the directions of the Police Oversight Ordinance. By so doing, you will be assisting both the POC to assist the APD and to improve public trust and confidence in the APD, the POC, and city government generally. For these reasons, I'm hereby requesting that you send a representative from your office to the March Ltpc meeting who is knowledgeable about the details of APD litigation, or in the alternative, authorize such an individual to meet privately with me before the March meeting to discuss the matter. The email was sent on March 14th. That same day, I got an email from Mr. John Du Bois, who's an assistant city attorney assigned to the POC. Dear Commissioner Shine, the city legal department does not discuss pending or past cases with anyone. As an attorney, you must know that all such cases involve attorney-client and work product privilege material. These privileges do not end because a case is over. To which I responded with another email to Mr. Turek. These are all copied to Mr. Du Bois and Ms. Hammer. This was on March 16th. Mr. Turek, Mr. Du Bois' response below to my email illustrates the importance of our having face-to-face conversations, either at a public hearing or in private, with an attorney from your office who has been involved in APD civil litigation, so that we can avoid any similar and unnecessary misunderstandings. In response to John's concern, we would be only interested in closed cases, and I have no intention or desire to in any way breach or negatively impact on anyone's attorney-client or work product privileges. There is a wealth of available non-privileged materials, such as APD administrative and criminal investigation files, interrogatory responses, depositions, and other discovery materials, as well as court pleadings and transcripts, which would provide ample sources of information for study of APD civil litigation. Again, I hope you will see fit to cooperate with the Ltpc and the POC in this study. That same day, I got another email from Mr. Du Bois saying, Dear Commissioner Shine, the answer remains no for the reasons previously given. I then sent another email to Mr. Turek only, saying I would appreciate it if you could respond to my two emails. Thank you, Dick Shine, and he has not responded. I report this to my colleagues on the committee in terms of what's happened. Up until now, the city attorney has refused to cooperate with our effort to look into this matter. I am now in the process of exploring other avenues to see if we can get some assistance in doing such a study so that we can get a better understanding of what's happening in terms of civil litigation and its implications for what we should be recommending in terms of SOP changes or training changes. That's the end of my report on what's happened on that particular item on the agenda. Are there any comments that anyone wants to make? Commissioner Barker.
What agenda item does that last statement relate?
Agenda item number 7, study of trends and analysis of all civil litigation against APD officers in the last 5 years. I was in the effort of I was in the process of trying to get the assistance of the city attorney's office in doing such a study. Commissioner Seaver.
Thank you for your efforts. Have you considered following this IPRA route that the city attorney recommended to you?
The problem with the IPRA route is we are a city agency. Although we're volunteers and here pro bono as citizens, we are city officials in a city agency, and it seems to me absurd to be asking one city agency to IPRA another city agency in order to get information. That's the first problem with that approach. The second problem with that approach is if we do an IPRA and we get 15 boxes of material, who is going to go through and do the reports? I mean, if you recall, we tried to do the 30-city study at the suggestion of the IRO, having the commissioners do the study. And after I did 5 of the 30 cities, it took an inordinate amount of time, much more time than most of the working members of the commission have, so that's impractical. So what we have is 5 boxes of material with nobody to analyze it, number one. Number two, the advantage of going in front of having lawyers involved, who are involved in the civil litigation, is that rather than go through a box of materials and read every sheet of paper, try to figure out what's going on, they can sit there and say, well, in that case, the most important issues were X, Y, and Z, and this is I think, the problem was created and how it can be solved. And you can do it in 10 minutes with a knowledgeable lawyer who was involved in the case without breaching any privileges, what would take days and weeks and months for an inexperienced person to do. In any case, we don't have such a person to go through those materials. Because the IRO's office is itself understaffed. They have enough trouble just keeping up with the CPCs, the citizen compliance.
Mr. Commissioner, I have some...
No, I'm sorry, sir, the public comment is over. We're now in the process of...
Well, I'm trying to help you.
Sir, please, stay in order, please, sir. Any other further comments from my colleagues? All right, then for the time being, we'll pass on that item, we'll keep it on the agenda, and I will continue pursuing efforts to find alternative ways to do this study in light of the fact that neither the IRO nor the city attorney's office has the capacity to staff such a study. Now we will go on to 2 new items that were put on the agenda at the request of the chair of the POC: review, analysis, and recommendations regarding the following SOP relating to an officer's discretion to enter a CAD reference in lieu of filing a police report. This came up at the last POC hearing when we were reviewing one of the citizen complaint review letters. Sergeant, can you tell us, is there now a SOP that deals with this issue?
We have SOPs that deals with issue as far as when you will write a police report.
And does it give the officer discretion as to when he writes a police report? Could you give us the number of the SOP?
Yeah, it's going to be 1-05-6. And it basically goes into a description of to what they will write a report on. It's going to be all felonies, misdemeanors, any arrests.
Just say that again?
It's basically a list of what officers will write reports on.
Right.
So it's going to be all felonies, misdemeanors, arrest, any warrants that arrests are made, traffic accidents, suicides, attempted suicides, child abuse calls, custodial interference calls, and anything where the officer that's of great importance where the officer is at the scene of the crime, or an incident where a citizen or victim requests a report. So if a citizen does request a report, an officer cannot refuse that.
He does not have discretion to refuse it.
Not to refuse a report. No, if somebody requests a report, they should be writing a report.
Are there anything in the SOPs which give the officer guidance on when he has discretion to do a CAD reference rather than a report?
There's nothing in the SOP as far as guidance. Now, if we get a call, like there's somebody that's in the neighborhood knocking on doors, that might be an incident that we would just add comments to the call. Just, kind of simple calls like that, and it's going to be based on that officer's discretion.
Commissioner Siegel.
I would remind you that this
Commissioner
was...
Siegel, before you go on, let me say this for the public. What you just seen with the item we just dealt with in terms of this civil litigation study was the fact that the IRO's office is woefully understaffed. At the December meeting of the POC, we recommended to the City Council an increase in the staff of the IRO's office, which I think was an increase of 7 or 8 people, including analysts and another attorney and more investigators. And the problem with one of the problems with the functioning of this organization, the Long-Term Planning Committee, and therefore also the POC, is that the IRO's office is woefully understaffed to do studies like we've just discussed, and we've now got to try to find alternative ways of doing them, when in fact they should be done by the city, by the IRO's office. But as long as the City Council doesn't provide and the mayor doesn't provide the funds in the budget to staff the organization so it can perform its function, then you have the kind of problem we've now got. Just so that we're not trying to ignore some of the problems that have arisen in the city in relation to the police. We're trying to deal with them, given the limited resources that we have, and also the limited authority that the City Council has given us in the ordinance. I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Siegel.
Okay, we're back to the agenda item. While we're jumping around and wanting to talk about past agenda items, it will be my intention under other business item X or 10 to ask the chair to reopen the floor and hear from anyone who feels that they would like to make a comment about any of these matters. We'll see if that happens, but I'd like to do that. There's been comments made and hands raised, and I'd like to acknowledge an interested public and allow them a chance to give input when possible.
We'll explore that.
Thank you.
Get to that.
With respect to the question at hand having to do with the filing of a police report, as a reminder to Sergeant Mock, the problem at hand was that an officer or a pair of officers, I don't recall which, were called to a retail establishment thinking they were going to encounter a shoplifter, but in fact it was a young girl who felt that she had either been manhandled, groped, or otherwise had some kind of sexual encounter that was very unwanted. And they, it turns out, didn't write a report, though she was expecting it. That seemed to me to be close enough in my mind to a felony and outrageous enough, and so it seemed as well to other members of the commission that this was referred back down to this committee. One of the things that occurred to me in the interim was we got a crowd here, in fact, that's very interested in accountability, and to create accountability, there need to be reports written. If we bury every officer under lengthy reporting details, there are less officers on the street to do their actual duties and do policing, and yet we want accountability, we want full reports. And I think that we probably need to take a look at how reports get entered. The most recent ride-along, I watched an officer writing from hand notes into her computer to fill out an appropriate report. One wonders whether there can't be a scanner like I have at my office that could pull in a piece of notepaper, and now suddenly their social security number, telephone number, name, date of birth, and everything is entered as an addendum to a report, and it could go quicker. I think we need, plurally, to look at ways of being more adept, more accountable, and freer to do the jobs that need to be done. And I'm trying to think creatively within the realm of your work and outside the box of what we've put ourselves into. I've heard officers complain, longtime officers particularly, that their paperwork is increasingly burdensome. I would hate to be the person who's asking for more burdensome paperwork and less quality police time. So we need to solve that, and I think that we need to keep going back to the drawing board, figuring out what's an acceptable police response to such a bad situation as the one that occurred, and to still find a way to be supportive and get the information noted. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for reminding me of the fact pattern. It was your understanding, as I recall, Sergeant Martin, was your view that at the time the officers had discretion not to report the sexual abuse allegation. They could just do it in the CAD, which is for the benefit of the public, computer-assisted, what's the D for? Whatever it is, it's the summary of the police radio communications, right? Dispatch, community assistant dispatch, thank you. But in any case, it's a form of, it is a form of written record. And, but one of the problems is it's not as readily available as a police report. A police report, you can just go downtown and public can get a copy of the report, right?
Well, yeah, for the public, but as an officer, you would be able to look up that report, that CAD report. You could do a history search on a certain address or anything like that.
But in terms of the difference, in terms of doing a CAD report, a reference, and doing a regular police report is the public availability of the report. Is that not so?
That's correct.
So that the public cannot go downtown and just ask for a copy of some CAD, which they may not even know exists. So that there's no way these young people could have gotten a copy of any report of the sexual abuse allegation.
They could request for a copy of that specific CAD, either through an IPRA request, or I believe they can even call down to communications and make a request for that.
They have to do an IPRA request for it?
Well, they could do it either that way, and I believe you could even call down to communications and file a request that way for that.
As opposed to just doing what if there was a written report?
It's the same thing. You have to still go down to either a substation or down to records to get a copy of the report.
And all she needs is he or she needs is the numbers of the report, and they can just pull the report. They don't have to make an IPRA request.
Yeah, for the report, yes.
So there is a significant difference in terms of the access to the public between the report and the CAD. Is there any way we can, in your view, is there any way we could amend, or whether an amendment is required for the SOP to make it clear that in that situation where someone's reporting, for example, sexual abuse, that there has to be a report written, even though they're not specifically saying, I want you to write a report?
Again, it's going to be, situational. And again, the CAD is like a report. Again, it's showing that, that incident has been reported when that officer adds those comments. So it is in lieu basically of a report, and it is a report itself.
Well, let me ask you this: when a citizen calls the police and said, "I'd like to make a report of X or Y," is that under that situation the officer is obligated by the SOP to make a report? Is that right?
Yes.
Is he satisfied that obligation by making a CAD report? Or does he have to file a report with numbers?
I would say you would have to file a report with the numbers. And
that's my concern. Why don't we leave it at this? Could you ask your colleagues or whoever you propose to ask whether they could look at the SOPs and see how they could amend the SOP so that even though there's no specific request from the citizen to make a report, when they're reporting an allegation which would, if true, constitute a crime, like sexual abuse, that they must do a report with numbers, that the officer must do a report with numbers and not have discretion to just do a CAD report.
Yes, again, I think there's a subsection D in the SOP, which basically does kind of apply to that, where it says any incident that is of great importance where the officer is at the scene. So,
Well, maybe if you could take a look at whether we should be more specific to make it clearer that, because I'm sure for the young ladies who are trying to report sexual harassment, that was important to them, and therefore it should have resulted in a report. And I think that was the sense of the commission. Mm-hmm. So if you could look at that and let us know next time what your recommendation is, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. No.
Does anyone else have any suggestions? Okay. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, and this is one of the citizens in the public comment made a reference to lapel cameras, and the fact is that currently, unlike most police departments in the country, this police department requires lapel cameras to be utilized. And in fact, the controversy, the most recent controversy, is the result of that ordinance, the availability of that lapel camera and have it be made public. But the next item on the agenda is review and analysis of the recommendation regarding the following SOP, amending the lapel camera SOP to expressly deal with equipment failure. And this was a problem that led to non-concurrences between the chief and the IRO that we needed to explore. Sorry?
Yes, and it's my understanding that they are working on a new version of that part of the SOP, so that will be addressed in that SOP.
Is that version, can we make arrangements to have the draft of that version brought to our attention so we would have input into the draft?
I'll have to look into that, I'm not sure.
Can you get back to us on that?
Yes.
I mean, otherwise, the other possibility that the chair of the POC suggested is I draft some language, and I'm happy to do that. But if you're already drafting, I'd just soon have you guys start the draft. But I'd like to have, I think that it would be helpful to have the committee have input into the draft.
Okay. I'll see what I can do.
Thank you. Okay. Any items on that? Any other comment on those items? Thank you. Commissioner Siegel.
I would just remark to you, Sergeant Mott, that while our remarks might not be binding, I think it would be useful for APD to be hearing what we as a civilian commission have to think and offer and say to you. And we would appreciate you taking that into consideration. Thank you.
To operate these recording device of any kind, the sergeant and ultimately the chief is responsible for that failure. So to punish a police officer for having defective or inoperable or failure to operate should reflect up the chain of command.
Let me also add to that, and this would be helpful if you could communicate this to your colleagues, that I think the sense at the commission, and certainly, well, it's my sense anyway, that any draft amendment would have to carefully balance between a true defect in the equipment, whether it be the computer or the camera, as verified by the IT specialist and with a written record to show that it actually happened, as opposed to an officer just saying, I tried to turn on the camera and it didn't work. Because that obviously would be an opening for just avoidance of using the camera. So however it's drafted, the amendment to the SOP has to try to carefully balance between those two to make it not possible for the officer to use a camera defect as an excuse to avoid operating the camera. Okay? Commissioner Barker.
We are extremely fortunate in Albuquerque that we require and we have police officers that use these cameras. You can imagine there are unfortunate incidents and we don't discuss things that are currently ongoing. However, without those lapel cameras and stuff, we would just be the recipients of written reports and not have anything from which to make a rational judgment. So we are fortunate in Albuquerque to not only have the cameras, but to have officers that will use them at all times.
Anything further? All right, we'll now move on. That completes this. We'll now move on to the agenda of the other business, and at the suggestion of Commissioner Siegel, we'll reopen the floor for public comment. Could you keep down the ordinance reaction, and so we can maintain an orderly meeting, please. Has anybody else signed up, or why don't we?
We have to move it. You made the motion, but it hasn't been seconded or carried on. That we would discuss this.
I think I've got discretion to. All right, I believe I've got discretion to do that. But if you want a motion, I'll make the motion to reopen the floor for public comment. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I too concur that we should, even though this is not within our purview to make any decisions and whatever, I would just say that we as a panel I would love to hear public comment. I don't know that we should respond with extensive comment ourselves. So I would ask, in most public comment meetings, the panel is required or cautioned to not even respond at all. And again, we are fortunate in this committee and in our commission itself, where we are given some latitude to respond to your comments. So I'll just ask my fellow commissioners to consider that.
Well, I appreciate that. We'll have to leave it to each commission because they have that choice. In any case, having concluded, I think, the discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It's carried unanimously. We'll reopen public comment. In order to do this all right, why don't we do it in this way, just have people line up rather than have sign-ups again. If you could identify yourself when you come up.
Line up alphabetically according to...
No. That's just Marine.
You can tell this guy's a bureaucrat. I guess he belongs to the police department. Anyway, I really thank you, commissioners. You're very thorough, very civil. You really listen to us. You wrote a fantastic email to the police department police chief. But as you can tell, I'm not that civil, okay? I could care less. They told you they didn't give a damn.
Can you remind us of your name, sir?
Yes, Dr. Luis Roberto Sosa. They send the sergeant out here. The chief of police ought to be here if he's really community-oriented and what have you. What I wanted to suggest, again, it's a discretion of the police department, a discretion of the police officers, and they want to protect their own interests. But it's sad that by sending this sergeant out here, he says, I don't give a damn what you want. I will not give you anything, whether you like it or not. But I wanted to make a suggestion. We have a law school, and has all kinds of good students, and we have a sociology department that has a criminology arm to it. And those students are also graduate students, students seeking a PhD, like this person was on here. All you have to do is meet with the chairman of those departments and ask help. And they can assign students to give you the type of information, the type of help that you need. And it's that simple. The university helps the bases in the military all the time. Why can't they do something for the community? Thank you very much, commissioners. And you two are fantastic. You listen, but they don't listen to you. I mean, it's very obvious for us.
Thank you, Doctor. Let me say I appreciate the recommendation. And one of the things I'm going to be exploring as alternative ways of dealing with it, given the lack of staffing, because the city council hasn't given the IRO the budget for the staffing. One of the ways I've been thinking about doing that, among other things, is by going to the law school and trying to get a student assistant. But I appreciate it, and also the sociology department. I appreciate that very much. But I hope that the audience now has a better understanding of what the limitations of our legal authority are. I mean, we can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. I've taken the position in front of the city council that the current ordinance is seriously defective and needs to be substantially redrafted to give more independent authority to the civilian oversight process. Now, whether the city council is going to do that, I have no idea. That's what the task force has just recommended to the city council. And maybe folks, if you're really interested in these issues, should come down to more police oversight commission hearings, not just the committee hearings, and also go to the city council and make your views known there. But that's up to you.
Excuse me, sir. You said that we could have 1,000 signatures to have a special meeting for you people?
There is an ordinance, in the ordinance there's a provision that if 1,000 citizens file a petition, they can ask for the Police Oversight Commission to have a meeting on a specific subject.
Okay.
And that's fine if citizens want to do that. I alert you, though, that we still have very limited authority. At the present time, the IRO and the POC only have the authority to monitor police officer-involved shootings, to monitor the investigations. That means the police do the investigation, Internal Affairs does the investigation. When it's done, it comes to the IRO for review and is then brought to the POC for review. There is no authority for the IRO or the Police Oversight Commission to independently investigate an officer-involved shooting. One of the recommendations I made was to the city council, in my proposals that I circulated to the city council, was to give that authority to independently investigate to the IRO and to the POC, or the successor organizations. But it's up to the city council whether they want to do that. And until they do that, even if we had a special meeting, there's very little that can be done by the POC, particularly before the investigation is completed by the police department.
Well, that's what the citizens of this community understand as a problem. And we're going to get back in the streets and raise some more hell, because we know that's the way things move. Thank you, sir.
That's obviously up to you, sir, and the citizens. But until we get the, if in fact the IRO had independent authority to investigate, the mayor wouldn't have had to say, let's go to Las Cruces to get an independent investigation. It could have been a civilian-run investigation by a police oversight commission and the IRO if we had the authority under the ordinance. But if you don't, we can't do it. Mr. Harrison.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to clarify on as far as getting a copy of a CAD report. It's very, very simple, and apparently even your own IA people don't know how to do it. All you have to do is look online and get the number of the communications center, which I believe is on Eubank and Paseo del Norte.
It's not Eubank, it's up on the west side.
What's that cross street there? It's further east of Eubank. I can't remember the cross street. But anyway, you can literally walk in their door, and they have a little window there, and you can ask for the number, if you know it, of the CAD report, or you can simply give them the time of day that the occurrence happened and any name that might be on that CAD report, such as your own or any witnesses that may have been involved or whatever. So it's very, very simple, and I believe it's 10 cents a page, or it used to be 10 cents a page. Maybe it's a quarter now. But anyway, that's the way to do it. Going downtown to APD headquarters, to the records department, you're wasting your time because it's going to take them forever to get it, and you'll probably have to come back. So you'll make 2 trips to get maybe 1 piece of paper. You can also, when at the time of whatever incident that you're in with the police officer, ask for the CAD number, and hopefully he'll write it down on the back of a business card for you or something like that. Let's see, the other thing I wanted to say was, yes, I agree that, this commission has no teeth, but you do have a microphone and you do have a camera. And I've asked this many, many times, why don't you take a vote of no confidence? Take a vote of no confidence in the chief of police. Take a vote of no confidence in the city council. Take a vote of no confidence in the mayor. Take a vote of no confidence in Mr. Turk, the CAO. Take a vote of no confidence in Mr. Turk. Look at how Mr. Turk has ignored you. He gave it to an underling to answer your lengthy emails. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And then last thing I'd like to say, it's very heartwarming to see this room filled. I came here in September of 2011. I was all by myself. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate being here. Come to City Council, April 7th.
The next person, please. Just state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Catherine McCallsky, and this is the first meeting of this nature that I've attended, and I am absolutely shocked at how there is zero accountability from the police department to any of your recommendations or investigations. And quite frankly, I'm disappointed in all of you sitting on this chair for continuing to perpetuate this sham, this fraud that really pretends that there is actual input or oversight from the community. You're just a puppet, this doesn't do anything. You don't have any power. And I can't believe that you're still a part of it if you actually care about the community and oversight of the police. This needs to change. We need to make sure that there is a committee that actually has some kind of power. So I urge you guys to do something with what power you have, even if that power is just to stand down and call this committee out for what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. I might say that I might say that I have considered resigning from this organization because I view it as sufficiently powerless. But my decision to remain on it was to try to help fix it from the inside, and it's a matter of choice. Mr. Barr.
Again, my comments were just exactly the same. You can't fix something from the outside, and you heard Commissioner Shine's email. We are not in opposition with things that have been said. We cannot fix them. We need you to the city council and speak your piece there. They're the ones that put us on the dais.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Barbara Groves. I live at 905 Silver Southwest, and I just want to say that we, as Catherine just said, my first meeting was listening to Carrie Brandenburg tell you people that, there's police shootings all over the country, and it's not unusual that Albuquerque doesn't prosecute these people because they're not prosecuted anywhere. So, what I learned from that is, district attorney has told us that if you want a murderer, join the police. There is no prosecution, and if there is prosecution, there are no convictions because the police have a hard job, and we all know they face danger and death every day. And, we've heard all that, and we appreciate that there is danger and death occasionally, but mostly it's in Albuquerque, it's us getting the danger and death. One of the things that we've been talking about here is this idea that people have to request a report in order for a report to be made in some instances, and it reminds me once again that in the case of Jonathan Mitchell, who was murdered in cold blood by his neighbor, the district attorney's office said, well, gosh, they were supposed to tell us to prosecute that. We lost paperwork. We don't know what happened about that. And the last thing that I want to ask is if you can actually give us, here on your agenda, it says, under number 5, review analysis and recommendation regarding the following SOP. A, relating to an officer being permitted to make false statements as part of a lawful criminal investigation. This is actually standard operating procedure that these people can lie and get away with it. It's allowed. Is that what this says? I just ask you. That's the end of my remarks. Thank you.
Ma'am, may I say that your statements are an example of our silence can't be taken as supporting you or either supporting or disagreeing with what you said. First of all, I disagree with your characterization of Ms. Brandenburg's statements to us. In terms of your question, the fact is the United States Supreme Court has approved of police officers misrepresenting the evidence in order to obtain a statement from a suspect during an interrogation. So that is, in terms of constitutional law in this country, that is an authorized procedure. Maybe new to you, but it's well known to law enforcement community and lawyers and prosecutors. So, and anyway, that's in response.
I understand the context of this now. Yes, when you're investigating a crime, you can tell people.
I mean, that's not saying that they can lie about anything they want. That's what we wanted to focus in on the SOP. That is, whether specifically we were focusing in on whether they could have the authority not only to lie, to make false statements to someone they're interrogating who's a suspect, but also the question is whether they can make false statements about the evidence to third parties, which gives rise to the possibility of problems of defamation and other problems. So it's a very technical and complicated area. The general answer to your question is police officers are authorized to make false statements as part of a legitimate criminal investigation.
Well,
The next,
thank you.
thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Great. I'm glad that you guys can acknowledge the fact that this group does not have any teeth whatsoever. And I'm sure there's a lot of us that can organize in the streets to demand that sort of thing. And to demand that instead of just being a few citizens, that it be a lot of them that have the power to investigate the police. And, if the city council is worried about funds, well, maybe we could just go and sell all the guns off that the APD has so that we can have enough money for it. As for the comment about the gentleman saying that you have to change it from within, I respect the diversity of tactics, but if we look at any successful social movement, the fight for the 8-hour work week, even women's voting rights, that was most definitely a movement from the outside. Were there some elements on the inside? Possibly. But the thing is that politicians, they don't wake up one day and say, well, maybe we should give women the right to vote, or, oh, wait, maybe we shouldn't be treating black people the way that we're treating them. They come to these conclusions because of the extensive pressure that's placed on them by the people, and that's what we did Tuesday. I was one of the organizers of the event on Tuesday, the protest on Tuesday, and it really shows us how public opinion can shape policy. And that's because we got out in the streets and we demanded justice. And even before we got out on the streets, if we hadn't have made a fuss about it, and that video hadn't gone viral, the mayor would not have said anything. These politicians who are opportunistic would not have been outraged as much as they are. Because they weren't outraged in 2010. They weren't outraged by the 22 other individuals who were shot and killed. And all of a sudden they're outraged because of this particular incident. I think that's it's a bit opportunistic of several individuals claiming to care about the welfare of the citizens. They should have cared back when Mary's partner was killed. Maybe they should have cared then, but they don't. But they don't, because they see us as criminals. They see us as being less than human. And when we talk about how dangerous a police officer's job is, when you look at the Department of Labor statistics, plumbers and fishermen have a much harder job than them, and have a much more dangerous job than them. And a beautician and a barber go through more extensive training than the police do. Police are only required to do 800 hours. So, what is that about? I think it's a sham.
Thank you, sir. I'll take your point, but I'd suggest that it's not a question of mutually exclusive, that you either work from the inside or the outside. The fact is that the ERA, unfortunately, to the extent it got passed at all, it was because not only people on the street, but people in the House and Senate passing the amendment so they could go to the states. And unfortunately, there weren't enough people in the states to get it passed. But anyway, that's a side issue. The point is it's a non-mutually exclusive. Yes, ma'am. Are you timing this?
My name is Ashley Steele-Chavez, as I said earlier. I'm actually an underemployed college graduate, so I would be willing to do some research for you in my spare time, if need be. I had brought up the lapel cameras earlier, and you guys said that the APD is forced to wear the lapel cameras. But there are still killings that occur that we do not have the lapel video for. I think that what made the James Boyd killing so prominent and so prevalent in the national and international media was that we had that video available. And I wonder why these killings still occur, why, police are going into homes and women are saying that they're being assaulted, for instance, and that is not on video. What happens to those videos? That is an issue for me. I think that you would not have the killing of Omari Varela, like he wouldn't have died had the cops had a video that showed how this child was being treated. I think it's a departmental issue that needs to be addressed. I think accountability is something that the APD is lacking, and very clearly we've seen, and a lot of us have been disheartened with this committee, that you guys may not have a little power. I respect what you guys do. I don't think that it's a sham. I think that it's necessary. I know bureaucracy has many different levels, and it's hard to get people to change. But if Mayor Barry and if the police chief refuse to listen, then where else are we supposed to get our voices heard? We're gonna come here, we're gonna go to the, City Council meeting, and we're going to have our voices heard, but who's gonna listen? I mean, this young sergeant right here, she's giving you answers that basically that basically end up being, no, I'm not going to answer that question. And that's not fair to her, because then our attention is directed at her, but it's not her that's doing that. It's the higher ups at APD. And I just want some way to hold them accountable, because I'm just a waitress. I mean, I don't really do much like with that. And I want to know that I'm safe in my community, that my uncles, my cousins, everybody's safe in my community, my father's safe in my community, and I don't have that assurance. And I came here just to get some sort of assurance, and all I've gotten is disheartening, because it's not like I can do anything from where I'm standing. And I really want to know why the lapel videos, if they are mandated, why these videos aren't made public, why we aren't aware of what they're doing in these situations.
Yes. Thank you, and I appreciate you coming down. We can't give you assurances. I'm not going to make false statements to you. I can't assure you of something I'm not powered to. But I can only say that a number of the officer-involved shootings did not have lapel cameras because they may have occurred prior to when the SOP was changed requiring the
When was that? Because since 2010, we've had 23 people shot and killed by the APD.
Do we
And that doesn't
know
even...
the date? Just a second. Do we know the date when the lapel camera SOP was cleared?
I don't have that right now.
No, it was
March 2012.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for taking our note from the audience, asking you to change your other business to us. We all signed that, and I appreciate you listening to us. We tried to respect your meeting by doing it that way. I hear you saying that you feel like your commission, the recommendations you've made to City Council have been ignored. They have not implemented your recommendations. They have not given you authority. So I'm asking, what can you do? When you say you can monitor investigations, what does that mean? What can you do? Because I didn't come here thinking that you can't do anything. I don't think you would waste your time being here and meeting with the sergeant and listening to us if there's not something you can do. So I think we all want to know, what can you do? Because we've heard a lot about what you can't do. And we've heard you say when you go to City Council to get that change, that you have tried to change that. But there must be things that you can do. So I think we really want to hear from you. What can you do? And not be told it's not on the agenda, you can't tell us. Because under other business, we were hoping you could. Thanks.
Let me clarify something. That is, the recommendations have been made to City Council by the POC task force just in the last month or so. And my proposals was I circulated to all the City Council in the last month. And that's not so. I'm not by any means suggesting the City Council refuse to act. I don't know what they're going to do. They are very actively involved in now deciding what they're going to do. The only point I was making is their decision, not ours. Okay.
Do any of the other commissioners want to say, what can you do? You're on this commission.
There are provisions in the ordinance that we're trying to implement. Some of them we have success at. Some of them we haven't so far, as you see from the email I just read. Yes. There's just a variety of things we're trying to do. And in terms of our powers, we're reviewing citizen complaints after the IROs and our staff and does an independent investigation of those citizen complaints. But that she only has the power to independently investigate citizen complaints. And lots of the concerns of the community involve matters that don't involve citizen complaints, like officer-involved shootings or other uses of force, whether it be taserings or anything else. And for that, we only have the power to monitor. And up until now, our efforts to try to exercise that authority have not been proved successful, shall we say, with the city. But we're still working on it. Commissioner C.
Thank you, Chairman Shine. From my point of view, there are a couple remarks I would make back to you. First of all, I feel fortunate to live in a society under a form of government where public input is still treasured, where it's still important, and where it's still legal, and where it's still safe. And I know that those of you who have come down to speak here do feel a cloak of public safety just by the numbers that are here and by your willingness to speak to us. If we were to hold a special hearing on, for example, the shootings that are so vexing our community right now, one of the things that we could take up, I'll read from the ordinance, is under our purview to promote a spirit of accountability and communication between the citizens and Albuquerque Police Department, and enhancing public confidence. Now, we can foster a dialogue. This is partially what's going on with public comment today. It would be further embodied by a fuller discussion in front of an entire commission hearing rather than a committee hearing, which is what we have today, which is why I've been hoping that we would have a special hearing to allow the community to come together and talk about a community problem. If you have ideas or ways that APD should be considering the investigation, APD should be willing to listen. They're not under your direction, but they would be willing to listen, one would hope. That's what it means to have some kind of dialogue ongoing here, and that's something that I personally would like to foster, and that's why I sort of jammed my foot in the door, if you will, and kept it there. I think, and I said it earlier, that there are a lot of, not even good, but great officers out on the street, and they need our support too. So we have lots of work to do together. I certainly wouldn't want to live in a city without a police force. There may be things that need adjusting and fixing and looking at, absolutely. But we also need to come together and work together as a city towards a better future. And I think that those are the kinds of things we can do as a commission. So you can bring forward positive suggestions for things to review, having to do specifically with the past events of the past few weeks, or more generally having to do with how it is that we have an interaction with APD and the structure of a commission like this. All of that's fodder for our discussion. Some of it goes to council as they talk about revising the ordinance, and it's not in our purview. And we receive an ordinance that's finished, and it is what it is, and we operate under that ordinance and within the law. I hope that makes some sense.
I have one question. So you're suggesting that we would get 1,000 signatures, that we could have a meeting so that we could just talk again, and that would just be listened to again. It would be us giving like public comment again, but it would be at a special on the, like if we pick the
It would
topic.
be the whole commission.
So it'd be another commission meeting, not a
It
committee,
might
a
be
commission.
fruitless. There are those who would say that's absolutely pointless, and there are those who would say, I think that it's a very meaningful and important part of an ongoing dialogue. And I think one could imagine either thought pattern being important. It's understandable. And thank you for being here, and every one of you.
Next, please.
Hello, my name is Cameron Crow. I came here today to see how this process worked. I was unsure, but what I've suspected is true, that it's completely ineffectual, and it's sad to me. I see and I'm glad the honesty from the council here, the commissioners, that it clearly lacks budget, clearly lacks resources, clearly lacks commitment from other commission members. I believe there's more than 3 to this commission, correct? No?
There are currently 6 commissioners, but this is only a committee of the commission.
A committee of the commission.
So there's just 3 of us on the
Full,
committee.
okay.
But this is not a full commission meeting.
I'm also disheartened to see that this committee, and I haven't seen the commission yet, but this committee lacks a dynamic representation of the community that we see here when it comes to ethnicity, class, genders, sexualities. I don't know how you've been appointed to your positions, and I don't criticize you for being who you are, but I am disheartened to see a lack of diversity among the committee. But in light of all of this and more, what I want to see from you, and I think what the people here want to see from you, and this is why I was moved to speak, because I hadn't heard anybody ask this, but I came here to get confidence from you that you're going to do the most that you can, that you're just as concerned with this issue as we are, that you also feel that your families could potentially be unsafe, that your friends could potentially be unsafe, that your fellow community members could be unsafe. And I want, like, we've made there's a specific group here that's made a list of demands. I mean, if you guys are ineffectual, that's fine, but I think you've been given a special place in this system. You've been given a title, if nothing else, that you can use publicly that gives more oomph to whatever you have to say and whatever you think. And I mean, I would like to see you be outspoken publicly. I think it's important. I think that it's your duty, if you really care about these issues, and in the specific place that you've been put, that clearly none of us have been put into. Yeah, I would just like to say that I would like to see you take the most radical steps possible to deal with such an extreme and disgusting issue, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Harrison, and then after this, I think we have to cut off public comment.
Okay, I just wanted to add one more thing that I forgot. There is a petition for a special meeting of the full POC, and you can sign it at the Peace and Justice Center. And copies are available if you'd like to take them out and have other folks sign them.
And do we get to determine if we have the petition? Does the public determine what the agenda is, or is that determined by the committee?
That's whatever, I've not been involved in any petition. You have to look at the petition and see what it says. All right, thank you very much for your public comment. Thank you for your time. Again, I encourage you to come to more POC meetings and more of these committee meetings if you're really interested. We're doing the best we can.
April 10th.
April 10th is the POC meeting at 4 o'clock in the City Council chambers. And it's on government TV. You're not there, you can watch it on government TV. Thank you very much. The meeting's adjourned.
Wow. I just wanted to say I hope that we can all find a way to address this quickly. It's like a matter of life and death, clearly, for a lot of us. And there's no reason why we should not feel safe calling the people who we're supposed to pay to keep us safe. It's a waste of money. Last I checked, if someone doesn't do their job, they get fired. Unpaid leave every time they shoot.